Hello. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first all-student meeting of this year. It's great to see so many of you here. Obviously, food works as a bribe. Before we start, is there any apologies or announcements that anybody would like to make? No? Good. Is there any SAB officers who would like to make a report? No? Good. Is there any questions to officers? There's no written questions, is there? No? Brilliant. Right. Juicy stuff. We're going to move on to the motion. So the first motion is SocsFed Made Simple, introducing multi-year societies federation and increasing financial transparency. Sorry, just before we start, can we just remind you that this is a discussion of motions and policy. Can we not make it personal? Can we not attack anybody? Anything like that, please. So stick to the policies. Thanks, Hock. You'll have 2 minutes to make a for and against speech. When you've got 15 seconds to go, Emma will do this, so start wrapping it up, and then we will cut you off after that. So I think Niall would like to make a speech, is that correct? Thank you.
Okay, SocsFed Made Simple. The existing Societies Federation fee model is currently obstructive to maximising the involvement in our societies, and by extension, the SU. Charging a statutory undergraduate fee of £19 per year has proved a barrier to sustained engagement and involvement within societies. This motion is in place to mandate the Societies Officer to introduce a multi-year Societies Federation fee. The fee will be offset based on the amount of years the member commits to. This is to ensure joining a society is more financially accessible while rewarding loyalty and commitment. The second part of the motion concerns financial transparency. It's important that society execs and members understand and appreciate where their society's federation fee is spent and how it benefits them. The society officer will be mandated to ensure an infographic is produced outlining broadly where society's federation fee is spent and how it bolsters student activities at Warwick SU. Increased and prolonged engagement in societies at Warwick is vital to helping the student community thrive. I hope that you will vote for the motion to make SocsFed more simple, diverse and accessible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Niall. Is there anybody speaking against the motion? Anyone speaking against? Thank you. Is there any comments or questions from the floor? No. In that case, we will go to an indicative vote. So all those in favour of the motion, please raise your cards. Where's your card? Thank you. All those against? All those abstained? Fab. We will now move on to the second motion, which is adopting the Coventry Food Charter, integrating approaches to food sustainability. Do we have a speaker speaking for the motion? Yeah.
Thank you. So this is a motion from Julie and myself. We are the current Environment and Ethics Officers, and we are working in our year in office on various issues relating to food, including food waste. The Coventry Food Charter is an initiative by Feeding Coventry, a local initiative, Coventry City Council, as well as various academics from Coventry and Warwick University. It aims to tackle issues such as food poverty, food waste, health and education around food, and we think it's crucial that the Students' Union is made a signatory of this. We can see that there's many environmental societies on campus, and in a later motion today we are discussing food as well, so this is a central issue that we keep discussing, that we keep tackling. So we should have a common framework with common goals that can outline future action as well as current actions, because Julie and me are not going to stay in office forever. There's a lot of turnover in the SU, and we need to make sure that these issues keep being tackled, because people keep needing food banks, they keep wasting food, And so we should have a common focus on that. But much more than the SU as well, we should also connect to local activities. Warwick University is in Coventry, and yet so many students aren't part of a Coventry community. They don't know what's going on in Coventry. They don't know the situation of many people living there. And this is yet another reason why we first need to increase awareness of these issues, but we should also try and work together with people from Coventry to make sure that these issues in the wider community are addressed and tackled. And then lastly, this can also provide something to the NUS and to Warwick SU as a national institution as well, because we would be the first students' unit adopting such a policy. We could raise these issues much more with the NUS, and we could make sure that people are paying attention to this, not just here, but all across the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone speaking against the motion? Nope. Is there any comments or questions from the floor? Fab. We'll go to an indicative vote. All those in favour? All those against? And all those abstain? Thank you. We are now moving on to policy 3, which is Warwick SU for safe and sensible drug policy. Have we got a proposer for the motion? Thank you.
It's fairly common knowledge that the majority of the student body, that there are several student nights in Leamington as well as the local area where it's common practice to take drugs instead of drink alcohol. Many Warwick students attend these events, and there have been several instances where students have taken drugs that haven't been as advertised, and the most extreme cases have ended up with students in hospital. Whilst the Students' Union does not condone the use of illegal drugs, as stated in the motion, the welfare of our students is of utmost importance. Some will continue to take drugs throughout their time here, regardless of the potential dangers. Therefore, we are responsible for enabling those students to make an informed decision of the drugs that they take. Several students' unions have already adopted a safe and sensible progressive stance towards drugs. For example, Sussex, Manchester, and Newcastle. They all allow students to buy drug testing kits from their advice centres. Furthermore, music festivals such as Reading, Leeds, Kendal Calling, and Secret Garden Party had on-site drug testing facilities this year, with the latter even receiving support from the local police and the local council. Voting for this motion will mandate the SU to buy such testing kits, which students can then buy from them. The kits cost £3.49 each if bought individually, or £1.80 per test if more than 40 are purchased at any one time. And we cannot stop students who desire to take drugs from doing so, but we can produce an environment in which they are able to more safely. I'm calling you to vote for this motion and vote for a safe and sensible drug policy to enable students to make an informed, safe decision about the substances that they consume.
Thank you. Is there anyone speaking against the motion? Yep.
Right, so this motion is sort of predicated on the idea that you can have safe drug use, so that as long as it's pure, it's all right to take drugs. And this is a bit dangerous, I think, of an implication to be making, because like MDMA, as mentioned in the motion, which the tests are involved in, I mean, it's involved in causing depressive symptomology, cognitive defects in memory tests. This is with high dose use and repeated use. You can build up a tolerance, meaning that you need to take more of the drug in order to get the same high, which increases the danger. You can even die from MDMA overdose, just not including other things that might be involved, but just from MDMA overdose. And there's been reports of it can produce serious adverse effects on the heart, cardiovascular system, immune system, liver and kidneys, and there's even been deaths from intracranial hemorrhage due to MDMA consumption. So I feel like buying these kits and saying, oh, people take drugs anyway, I think is not a very good use of SU money, whereas it would be much better to use that money that would be spent on this and inform people of the actual risks and dangers of taking these drugs, because rather than just saying and sending the message, which I feel like does actually condone drug use, despite what the motion says, if you it sends the message that it's okay to take these drugs, and it's not actually tackling the cause of the actual problem, which is You know, I agree that there is a problem. I agree that you're not going to totally eliminate students from taking drugs, but I feel like people need to be more educated on the dangers rather than just basically encouraging them, that saying it's fine. And you mentioned that it's £3.49 for a test, and like that's not really that prohibitively expensive. If someone wants to buy one of these tests, there's nothing stopping them going online and buying one. Whereas, you know, I don't see it as a very good, effective or good use of the SU money.
Thank you. We'll have to cut you off there. Sorry. Thank you.
Hi, I would just like to say, I think it's all very well to say that taking drugs is bad, but it doesn't recognize the fact that some people taking drugs may be the only way they can cope with their life. And in that sense, we should be able to support the welfare of those students. Overall, providing drug testing to make it safer does not mean that it still benefits the overall student population. And lastly, you said we needed more, like we should spend the money on drugs education. But the trouble with that is, A, most of us have been through it at school and we can see it's not that effective. But secondly, what's much more important to have drugs education that actually allows people to use and have the knowledge to use drugs safely. For example, abstinence-only sex ed doesn't work. Why should we expect the same policy to work for drugs?
Thank you. Now, Christian, 41.
Yeah, thank you. I would just like to point out that the motion in this union resolves in number 1 actually also mandates the motion to provide drug education. So saying that we should spend money on that instead of that is just not true to the motion. And secondly, buying these kits online, yes, it works, but it's not particularly accessible because the places you can order these from don't necessarily have the reputation of a website that looks very legal and nice and is something where loads of people would go and buy them. So even if they wanted to test their drugs, they might not do it because they're put off by the website, and they might think that buying one of these is actually a criminal offence, or they shouldn't, or whatever might happen. But if the SU offers them, they're given a sense of legitimacy, which they definitely have, because let's face it, people will keep using drugs, and people should be able to do that in a safe way, and they should have access to means of reducing harm. And this is definitely a mean of reducing harm, and people keep dying because the substances they take aren't what it's advertised as. Yes, people also have negative results from drug use in general. That is a whole different topic, but it's a much smaller issue than it is that if you take an MDMA pill, that isn't MDMA, but it's meth, and that is a difference that is huge. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to pick up on something the guy speaking against mentioned, that it's never safe to take drugs, which is true, but it's also never safe to smoke a cigarette, drink alcohol, or go to McDonald's. Obesity is becoming one of the main killers of people in this country, especially men. Smoking still kills up to half of its users. And if you look at smoking, it's gone down by about half since the mid-70s because of the strong campaigns of smoking kills and all of that, which is all really powerful stuff, which the SU will, I assume, continue to advocate against the use of illegal drugs. However, no one suggests, it would be insane to suggest that because people shouldn't smoke and people know they shouldn't smoke, we should let them put whatever they want in the cigarettes. That would be ridiculous. Simultaneously, I don't think anyone would be, if McDonald's started pumping sewage into their burgers, which they may very well be doing, no one would say, well, you shouldn't be eating McDonald's anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, I basically just echo what's already been said, but in regard to the money, we have a SAB fund and we've agreed that we can use that for the initial batch, and we will be charging students for them, so we will be getting the money back. So really the money argument doesn't seem to work, as we won't actually be losing out on anything. And also, it's been like, prohibition doesn't work. We can't just say we condone this, don't do it. It's much more effective if we provide students with these kits. It's much more safe, and having the attitude of the attitudes that have been presented, again, just doesn't work, and it's counterproductive. So.
Okay, so 1 point and 1 question. I'd say in terms of, yes, the fact that deaths from illegal drugs, if you take ecstasy, for instance, most deaths from so-called ecstasy aren't actually from MDMA, the substance itself. It's usually from PMA, which is a common adulterant in ecstasy, because it's cheaper to produce and it's easier to put it in. Drug testing kits would get rid of that. To the fact that Portugal, which has decriminalized drug use since 2001, has seen a considerable drop in illicit drug deaths, mainly because they have widespread testing. And they have a culture where you can go to see what your substance is and then use it with that knowledge. I think it's absolutely crazy that this hasn't been suggested before, and thank God it's being suggested now. And the question I'd have is, there's lots of different types of drug test kits. Most of them show you that it's not actually the substance, but just that adulterants like PMA aren't in it. Could we have some more information about what type of drug test it is?
Yeah, so there are 2 kits that I've been looking at. There's one which is just for MDMA, but there's also one for ketamine, which tests for PMA as well. So those are the 2 I'm looking at, but if it did work and there was demand for more, then that's something that we could look into.
I just got a question to the proposer of the motion. So just to clarify, I'm a bit confused. Are the drug testing kits going to be subsidised by the union, or is it just making it accessible to students for those who want to buy it? I'm just a bit confused about that.
Yep. Yeah, so essentially we will buy the initial batch of kits that are available, and then when students come and buy them, we'll then charge them for that. So we're just getting the initial ones and making it cheaper and more accessible to students, because it's much more expensive if you buy them individually online. So it just makes sense to do that.
I commend the motion, really good actually. Just a couple of questions to the SAMs, because you mentioned the SAMs budget, so I'm wondering, will it be cost neutral, or will it make a small profit, or will it be cost negative? And according apparently the SAMs budget, you're using it to fund this initially. How much from the SAMs budget are you going to use, and what is the size of the SAMs budget? Thanks very much.
So we're definitely not going to make profit out of students, because that would be atrocious. To do it from the SAV fund, we're definitely not going to do that. If there is any, we'll work out at kind of like an affordable cost. If there is any money that's kind of like left over from them all being sold out, or whatever, that will go straight into the educational materials. So obviously it's essentially cost neutral in the sense that any money that is any additional money that is generated on top of the cost of the kits would go into the educational materials. The SAB budget is £2,000 between the 7 officers for the whole year.
With this motion, we have generally been talking about current users and the effect drug testing kits would have on them. But I think also we should take into consideration people that are not currently using drugs. The dangers of drugs is one reason perhaps people don't take drugs in the first place, the possibility that they may harm themselves from using potentially dangerous substances. This is generally just a rhetorical question, but if we have drug testing kits, what will have that effect on removing that disincentive for people not to try drugs in the first place?
Disincentives don't work. And they've been proven in so many studies when it comes to drugs, when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to other substances, they just don't work. At the end of the day, what we have right now is a situation where many students, whether we like it or not, whether you like it or not, are using drugs. And I think that it's disingenuous to suggest that because there is a drug testing kit there, that people that were previously not going to use it are like, right, sign me up straight away. I just don't think that's actually true to reality. And it's not just me that thinks that, science and evidence and research has suggested that. I unfortunately can't quote a study right off the top of my head, but it is an established fact that disincentives like that don't work. And ultimately, as a students' union, our duty is to the welfare of our members. We know that welfare is at risk when students are taking drugs that aren't pure, and we know that happens, and we know that it's a reality, and we should do everything we can to suggest that obviously the safest way to take drugs is to not take them at all. But there are safer ways of taking drugs, and this is absolutely one of them, and we should be doing it to protect our members.
I'd say if you really want to disincentivize drug use, look at that place and look at that place, right? That's the legal equivalent of a crack den, and that's the legal equivalent of a meth lab or something, right? If you really want to disincentivize the harms of drugs, look at the drugs that are already legal in society and the damage that they do. And notice how we don't disincentivize them at all, right? That place and that place do much more harm to the Warwick students than any illegal drug right now. So I'd say if you are really concerned with this, target those. Don't look at illegal drugs.
Okay, we will now go to an indicative vote. So all those in favour of the motion? All those against the motion? And all those abstaining? Thank you. We will now move on to fourth motion, which is improving eating and drinking services on campus. And I think Michael would like to make a proposer speech for this motion.
Hello everyone. Okay, so with Warwick being a campus university, we're 9 miles from Leamington, 4 miles from Coventry. It's quite difficult for a lot of students to nip home, have a meal, then come back to their studies, their jobs, their extracurricular stuff. When you're on campus, you're on for the most part. This means that a lot of people have to either eat cold packed lunches or spend a lot of money buying food and drink while they're on campus. Having more microwaves and free water heating facilities around campus would mean more students are able to eat hot meals and enjoy a cup of tea or coffee without it being too much of a financial strain. The next section, about outdoor water fountains. There are very few outdoor water fountains at any of our sports pitches, if any, and only a few inside both the main sports centre and the Westwood Games Hall. Buying bottled water repeatedly is not only expensive, but also bad for the environment. Increasing the number of water fountains on campus would not only be good for those athletes who need to be constantly hydrated, and so need better access to such fountains, but it'd also be good for both the environment and students' finances to be able to refill their bottles more easily for free. And finally, prices across Warwick retail have gone up this year, not only for food and drink, but also for hot water, which has risen from 50p to an outrageous 75p, simply to have access to heated water. In addition, alternative food options, such as those that are dairy-free or vegetarian or vegan, have gone up disproportionately compared to other options. Voting for this motion would enable the SU to further lobby Warwick retail over these unfair price increases and help reverse them wherever possible to try and make sure that students who are forced to buy food and drink on campus can get a better deal. I want eating and drinking services across campus to be improved for all Warwick students. Whether you're working with sweat on the sports pitches or beaving away in the library, I want you to be able to heat up your lunch, fill up your water bottle, and make yourself a nice cup of tea. If any of this sounds good to you, then please vote for my motion and help me put some microwaves, kettles, etc. around campus.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Michael, for the motion. Just could I ask you specifically, I know you mentioned about lobbying the university to lower prices. Could I ask you to look specifically into Library Cafe? You may have seen that the price of a Library Cafe breakfast, and I did launch a government petition about this, which was rejected, has risen from £3.50 to £4.25. It still includes a coffee, but if we could, it's a Magnificent 7, by the way, so if we could either make it a Super 8 or a Magnificent 8, if we could lobby them for that, or if we could lobby for a price decrease, I'd appreciate it greatly. Thank you.
Henry, I like a library breakfast as much as you. I had one every day in second year, you can see the results. You're pleased to hear, it's really hard to find sources for prices in the library, Warwick retail, because there's not much online. So originally I had your petition as one of my sources. Before it got pointed out, it was a terrible source and it got removed. But don't worry, I was aware of it. And yes, I'd love to get the library, wherever the deals were back. I can't remember the names as well as you do, haven't thought about it quite as much, but yes, that is definitely part of the unfair price increases.
In response to both Henry and Michael, a quick point of information. You may know that WMG have very good links with industry and all sorts of things, and as a result, it subsidises food for all its students and staff to the cost of £3.37 for a whole hot meal if you go to the pit stop any day of the week from Monday to Friday. So I think I wonder what your opinion is on lobbying the university to subsidise food for all students, not just WMG students.
I think this is an issue across Warwick University, not just in food, but in terms of academics as well. Departments subsidise some of their students, whereas other departments don't. Obviously, I'd like Warwick University to subsidise all food for all students, and I can see how they do it and how viable it is. But my guess is some departments have more money to spend on food for their students than others. But yeah, it could be something to look into.
I think it's a great motion, so I'm speaking for it. But I'd like to. Do you have any suggestions as to how to, if there are going to be more spaces where people are eating because they're able to heat up stuff, how you might keep them smelling nice? I say this because today I had to walk out of the maths undergraduate room because it smelled so bad.
So the places they've looked into, because this is sort of in process, but I found that it's a lot easier to get the university to do stuff if you say you're democratically mandated to, and you've got that backing. But it is sort of in process. The places they've looked at are quite well ventilated. One of the latest places was actually, the library, near the vending machines, in that kind of area. Whenever those doors open, smell goes out. But it is an issue, and it is one of their main worries when I've talked to them about it. And I think it's just making sure there's a provision that's there is a cleaning thing going on, and also a bit of, you've got this privilege to be able to heat up your stuff, so look after the space, and asking students to take that into their own hands a bit as well.
We'll go to a vote. So all those in favour? All those against? And any abstains? No, fab. Okay, so the fifth motion is keep Wednesday afternoons free for Enrichment Wednesdays, and I believe Hope is speaking.
So WAF, in the Students' Union, it is our firm belief that university life is about so much more than simply your academic course. University is the time where students should be free to pursue their passions, whether that be through representing university in Bucks Wednesdays, volunteering, undertaking part-time work, engaging in their societies, or simply having space away from academia to practice self-care. As it currently stands, the university has a policy of ceasing academic timetabling at 1 p.m. for taught undergraduate students on Wednesdays. However, this is not adhered to by multiple departments, it's not applicable to all of our students, and often results in students missing their extracurricular activities because of it. The Wednesday Afternoon Free campaign is designed to lobby the university and give the sabbatical team a solid democratic mandate to encourage students to enrich their Wednesdays. This motion includes lobbying the university to extend the existing policy to 12 p.m, mandating the sports and education officers to develop a system of authorised absence for students who are formally representing the university in sport, and ensuring that this policy extends to all taught students on a campus-based, full-time majority course of a length of a year or more. If you want to be free to pursue what you care about and believe that your university experience is about more than just your academic experience, then vote for this motion and work with us to enrich the Wednesdays of as many Warwick students as possible. Thank you.
I recognise the, genuine goodness in trying to propose this motion, but I feel like it's as well thought out as the lecture 3 week 0. It's like some courses have fundamentally lots of contact hours, so I don't think it's sensible to have like this keep Wednesdays afternoons free thing, because sometimes some lectures can only be timetabled for 1 p.m. So it's like you're forcing departments to force, with limited spaces, to force them to kind of teach everything outside. And I just find it not very, well thought through. That's what my opinion is, but yeah. Go.
Sorry, I was eating a biscuit. I would disagree. I think it is very well thought out, and it's something that actually was a priority of last year's SAB team as well as this year's SAB team. So it's had a lot of thought and a lot of reconsideration, and kind of the three strands of the campaign have been we've come to them for very specific reasons. I completely agree with you. There are certain courses that are less suited, and it's less simple to get this policy passed. But I don't think that means that we shouldn't try, because I think ultimately often what you find at the university is certain departments who are very stubborn, and they're like, we don't like change, we just want to stay this way forever because that's how we've done it, and that's how it should always be, which is annoying because that means that a lot of students are suffering as a result of it. And I think that ultimately we have already started approaching academic departments such as WMG, for example, who are going to definitely be a big stumbling block with this. And we're just engaging in conversation with them. We're not shouting at them, we're not having a go at them, we're just saying, can you please explain why teaching happens on Wednesday afternoons, and can we please explore collectively the options for changing that potentially, and we'll see how it goes. So I think that, we're not going storming into the departments and occupying them or anything, don't worry, but maybe it'll happen. No, but it won't. But yeah, so it is thought out, I would say, and we have a plan, and hopefully it will work.
I would just like to say, as a maths student, which is probably one of the more intense courses, certainly the amount of hours of lectures you have, so we have 20 to 25 hours of lectures a week and contact hours. The maths department already keeps Wednesday afternoons free, and it works fine for us. And in fact, that's when we have their maths academic support, that maths soc runs. So it's actually a really good idea. And I think if one of the most work-intensive departments can fit it in, there's no reason why everybody else shouldn't be able to.
Yeah. I was just going to say, if Hock's opposition is that they have too many contact hours in the first place, then surely giving them Wednesday's afternoon off to either play sport or take on work is the best possible thing we can do. If you're moaning about them having too many contact hours, surely having Wednesdays off kind of solves that problem. Thank you.
I think the point is that you have an X amount of contact hours. If you have 25, you have 25. If you have 30, you have 30. If you have 20, you have 20. But if you have a heavily intensive course and the timetable is done by university timetable, and you've got to fit in with all the other cohorts in that year group, like a large year group like engineering, for example, or history or whatever, then I just don't think, I think you're trying to force the university to basically adjust timetabling issues. I just think it's not, it's a really minor thing that I think it will cause more hassle than it's worth. That's what I personally think.
We will take to a vote. So all those in favour? All those against? And any abstains? We will now move on to focus on fees, end the NSS boycott. Would Ben like to make a speech? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. In short, this motion does three things. It reflects the change in higher education policy and repeals the outdated motion. Secondly, it recognises the success of the Students' Union in their campaign to sever the link between tuition fee increases and the NSS. Thirdly, it frees up the sabbatical officers' time so they can focus on campaigning directly to scrap or lower fees. The original motion, Stop Tuition Fee Rises, Boycott the NSS, mandates the Students' Union to actively boycott the NSS on the grounds that it will help stop tuition fee rises. The Teaching Excellence Framework, or TEF, which uses the NSS, is no longer linked to tuition fee increases, and the government is launching an independent review into tuition fees and associated metrics. In the meantime, they have frozen tuition fees until 2020. The SU made a submission to the Parliamentary Committee for the Higher Education and Research Bill and made other interventions in the public debate. These informative contributions played a role in convincing the government that they were misguided in their former approach to tuition fee increases. The sabbatical officers have limited time and resources. Now the NSS is no longer linked to tuition fee increases. This motion will free them from their current mandate so they can focus on fees. Without the NSS boycott, much more of Warwick Students' Union's energy can be focused on directly opposing tuition fees, rather than opposing the completion of a survey that has no link to them. The expertise of our officers and members can be harnessed to contribute to the government's review so it reaches the right outcome for students. The NSS is a useful feedback method in its own right. Whilst it has its problems, as all feedback methods do, it can be used in conjunction with SSLCs, the ITLR and the SU's all-member survey and others to reach the right outcomes. From the last NSS, one department in the university had 16 pages of free text feedback that has helped devise a strategy for improvement. Where possible, we should use this information to students' advantage. Tuition fees are a huge issue directly... Oh, thank you. This is the perfect time to tackle tuition fee rises with the government's independent review, so please vote for the motion to focus on fees and end the NSS boycott.
After a hugely successful NSS boycott last year, it is clear that now would be the absolute worst time to end the campaign. Firstly, on the issue of fees, this motion is incredibly misleading. Whilst it highlights that the NSS boycott was successful in forcing a delay in the link between TEF and fees until 2019-20, it completely neglects to mention the fact that NSS data from the previous 3 years prior to this date will be used as part of the TEF process. This means that NSS data provided by students this year will be used directly to prop up a mechanism which will see tuition fees raised. To oppose further tuition fee rises, the NSS boycott must continue. Secondly, the motion also fails to recognise just how flawed the TEF is as a whole and how damaging it is that NSS data is used within it. Measuring supposed teaching quality by looking at NSS data has been widely criticised by sector experts. Even the Royal Society of Statistics have slammed these proposals, stating that there is no reliable association between NSS data and quality of teaching. To oppose the TEF and the devaluing of our teaching, the NSS boycott must continue. Finally, the motion gives the impression that the NSS is a force for good within higher education, but the NSS is a notoriously flawed mechanism for student feedback. It centres on quantitative data, meaning the valuable qualitative insight from students is often overlooked. It leaves out the vast majority of our students. It's been shown to reproduce institutional racism, and it has been a key driver for students being treated as consumers. There are many other far better models for student feedback. To oppose a flawed and damaging form of feedback, the NSS boycott must continue. Through the NSS boycott, for once students have a direct way of impacting higher education policy. We need to build on the success of last year's boycott and continue the campaign in order to stop further fee rises and to oppose the marketisation of our higher education system. I urge you all to vote against this motion.
So firstly, the NSS boycott was successful, you said. I think that the way we should define success is whether or not it was not about the number of people who filled out the survey. It should be about whether the outcome was reached. At the moment, tuition fee increase, there's not going to be tuition fee increases in current government policy. We do have the independent review, which means that this is the perfect time to actually contribute in a more effective way. The NSS boycott was not the only thing that led to the government rethinking it. Otherwise, the SU, yourself included, Hope, would not have spent so much time contributing to the parliamentary inquiry. So this is a multifaceted campaign, and it makes sense that I think that we should focus on these alternative ways as well, because they are more directly linked to tuition fees. Also, wait, I only have a minute. Can I respond to something later?
You've got 10 seconds now.
Okay, there's no data to show a quality of teaching improvement, but there is evidence that I can show you which suggests that actually there is improvement that can be gained through this, which is presented from the PACE department, that shows there are improvements that can be made
Thank you, I'll have to
through
cut
the
you off.
NSS feedback.
Thank you.
Hope touched on this in her speech, and I would just like to reiterate this. The NSS is fundamentally flawed in the fact the way the results are used by the TEF does enforce institutional racism. It has been statistically proven that departments with, or universities with more people of colour will get a lower TEF outcome regardless of the actual teaching quality. Secondly, this is likely to affect other people in the liberation community, such as LGBTQA+ people, who are likely to experience similar forms of bias against them. And secondly, the NSS survey itself is incredibly narrow in its focus in that it's chiefly academic. This disadvantages people in the liberation community and other students as well, in that it only reflects your academic experiences. It doesn't reflect the fact that you could have been subject to harassment because of your identity or your sexuality or whatever at university. So it's a very one-sided metric.
It's true, right? They listened to the qualitative comments in the NSS and they implemented changes. That's great. Why can't we do that without the NSS? Why can't students just go to a department and say, hey, here's something we've thought about, here's feedback we'd like to give, here's a SSL system, will you do something about it? The problem with the NSS is because this university and universities chase it relentlessly. All they do is chase metrics. I've been in committee meetings where they've been like, let's pump thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds into buying free pizza to bribe students to fill out the NSS in the way they want, and I'm there like, course rep system, resources for the course rep system, and they're like, nah, but the NSS though, because that's the culture of the NSS. It actively means that universities are neglecting other far better forms of feedback. The NSS is one snapshot of final year undergraduates at one stage in their university career. That is not good enough feedback. We need continuous feedback, we need democratic feedback, we need feedback that continues throughout their time, that is discursive between universities and departments. The NSS doesn't do that, and it actively means that universities are neglecting forms of feedback that do that.
For one thing, the point of this motion is not to say we should only use the NSS as a feedback method. It is encouraging the Students' Union and the university to use other feedback methods. So it's about triangulation of research methods when it comes to actually getting feedback. I agree there are flaws with the NSS. I understand that. But the point of this motion, as it says, is to repeal the original motion, which is about lowering tuition fees by boycotting it, which is no longer the case because of the de-linkage between increases and the NSS and TEF. And it is about focusing on the fees, allowing the sabbatical officers to focus on directly tackling tuition fees rather than just boycotting a survey. The idea that it is neglecting other feedback methods, it is to fail to understand that I agree they should be focusing on other feedback methods more, but at the moment, this is the way the university listens to. It's what it currently listens to, and so we need to make use of that for the students who are currently in our education system at Warwick.
So I largely agree with Ben. There's one point, kind of to echo his point really on, in terms of it discredits us with the university. I think that's one of the main issues that I have with the NSS boycott. As Ben says, it's the main method by which the university want to use, and the government want to use, and most other universities want to use. By just plainly saying, I understand that this university is a free education university and it's democratically mandated to do that. As Ben has said, the NSS is arguably no longer linked to tuition fee rises. If that wasn't the case, then I would understand opposition to it. But as that is not the case, I fail to understand opposition to it. It's just discrediting us, making us look rather silly, and meaning that we can't have a constructive debate with the university.
So when you say it discredits us with the university, I couldn't disagree more, actually. I mean, I've had numerous conversations with the university members, actually specifically about the NSS boycott. And the interesting thing is that actually, staff members on the ground, i.e. the university, they support the NSS boycott. Academics despise the NSS because they see what it does to education. They see how it's turned students into consumers and them into hollow service providers. NSS boycott is supported by the National UCU, which is the Lecturer and Lecturers Union. They support it nationally. And so, yeah, senior management might get a bit pissy if we mess up their NSS results, but what's more important out of annoying the Vice-Chancellor or saving the future of higher education? I would much rather save the future of higher education. Like, this is about marketisation. I'm not interested in an officer, as an officer, in having, like, friendly banter with the Vice-Chancellor. I'm interested in fighting for students. And that's what we're trying to do with this NSS boycott. That's what we partially succeeded in doing last year. We've got to keep it up. We can't drop it now. We have to keep it up. This is so crucial for the future of higher education. Can't overstate it enough.
The NSS boycott, it's a campaign. The idea of the NSS being what the government and the university wants, we shouldn't necessarily do what the university and the government wants, because that is not the point of campaigning. It's not rolling over and getting your belly stroked. I was just wondering what would necessarily be the benefit of doing the NSS when there are these other methods and the boycott seems to be working at the moment. What would be the point in giving up now?
Just to explain how PACE uses the NSS, it's not about just it. So, for example, the SSLC for PACE has just circulated the results of the NSS and is devising an action plan with the department. So it is using the data from third years, which does to some extent reflect the experience of those in first and second year and current third years. And so that's how they're using it in a positive way through the other research, through the other feedback methods. The NSS and academics is something you're making a very broad claim on. I have spent some time talking to academics before I proposed this motion, and they were saying that they think the NSS boycott is misguided because it does waste their time. And so they are in support of the NSS. They may not agree with it fully, neither do I, but it has its merits. Also, you quoted the UCU union. Yes, the leadership may be against it, but they've never had an official ballot on it. And also, they said that in the January newsletter that we must be sensitive to the fact that some staff have promoting the NSS written into their job description. And so this boycott can actually be harmful to those members of staff. So it's not a blanket description as it's been described. That's the only thing I'd say on that.
Okay, so the motion was passed by National UCU. That means that nationally UCU is mandated to back the NSS boycott. Yes, there might be some staff members that are in favour of the NSS, but nationally that was the democratic decision. The link between fee rises and TEF has not been cut. I just want to stress that it is not been cut. It's been delayed, and we have a guaranteed fee freeze for 1 year. That's the only guarantee we have. It has not been cut. The threat is still there. It's been delayed through the success of the NSS boycott and through other mechanisms, but it is still there, thus the campaign must carry on. Also, I can guarantee you that this is not the only thing we do on fees. I've spent the last 3-4 weeks doing a lot of campaigning around tuition fees. I have done ever since I've been a sabbatical officer. As a students' union, we are very committed to that. We do it in a multifaceted way, and that will not stop if we carry on the NSS boycott.
I'd just like to say that, so you said, okay, we can use other measures as well as the NSS. But if the NSS is there, then the university's got a nice little thing that works for them and suits them that they can use. So why should they bother to invest in other means of feedback? And secondly, saying that a boycott just isn't effective and it makes us look silly. Like, you could say the same about, by that logic, you'd say that strikes are silly, but strikes are effective. They get stuff done. And, we're not going to get things how we want by just asking nicely. I'm going to go for my favorite example because I think it's valid. Trans women of color fighting and rioting in the streets were what gave LGBT people rights. We didn't ask nicely. And I don't think we should ask the government nicely either.
I just have a question, really. What's wrong with the marketisation of universities?
This motion is not about the marketisation of... I'm saying this motion, I am putting it forward as it's not about the marketisation of education. This is about focusing on tuition fees and ending the NSS boycott as part of that process. And so it's not really exactly relevant to this debate in the sense of what this motion explicitly is about.
I think I heard earlier something to do with our reputation wouldn't be damaged. In fact, boycotting the NSS actually benefits our reputation. But for the last time I checked in the National League tables, we've come top 10 in every ranking for the last 40, 50 years, Warwick has. So I just feel like if we're aiming for silver, isn't that just devaluing our reputation as a good university that employers and other leading research institutions value graduates from this university? And that's one of the issues I have with the initial boycott and the current boycott, and I do commend a collaborative approach in dealing with this with the government as such. And my final thing was going to be, actually I've forgotten it, so that's okay, thanks.
This motion repeals the outdated motion that does not reflect the current state of higher education policy. There is now the most pertinent time we could tackle tuition fees because the government is now listening and there is going to be an independent review into tuition fees and the metrics used. I understand the logic behind the NSS boycott, but it is now no longer the most powerful way we can challenge the government. No one is disputing the marketisation of education is bad. That's not what this motion's about. We already have SU policy on that. This is just about saying tuition fee decreases and the end of tuition fees are now in reach because the government is listening. So let's please use all our resources, not looking at a survey and saying, no, please don't fill it in. It's about saying no to the government and protesting properly and really, really getting to them that this is the time to listen and to stop tuition fees. That is all this motion is about.
I agree now is the time to tackle tuition fees, and I really hope to see as many of you as possible on the streets next Wednesday, on Wednesday for the national demo. I'm passionate about campaigning against tuition fees. This is one of the things that we have to use in our armoury against the fight of tuition fees, right? Like, this is one of the things we can use. It was effective last year. We're not done yet. The link is still there. The link with the fees is still there. It has not completely gone yet, and we have to, giving up now would literally be the worst possible time. The NSS is fundamentally flawed. It continues the marketisation of higher education. The threat of fee rises is still there. Giving up now would be the literal worst possible thing we could do. Bun the NSS, boycott the NSS, vote against this motion.
We will now go to an indicative vote. So all those in favour? And all those against? And all those abstained? It's all right. Thank you very much. That concludes the meeting. Just to say, voting for the ASM opens tomorrow at 9 a.m, closes on Friday at 12 p.m. If you have registered as a campaign group, campaigning starts tonight at 8 o'clock. So, Michael, would you like to speak on this?
Okay, I'll keep this brief. To reaffirm the Students' Union current affiliations, as you can see there, NUS, Bucks, Advice UK, CPAG, NCVO, UK CISA, and Coventry and Warwick Chamber of Commerce to continue these affiliations.
Any comments or questions? Okay, we'll go straight to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstains? Thank you. The deadlines for the next motions is 20th of November, which is next Monday. So if you have any motions, make sure you get them in. You can come and talk to any of the democracy team if you need any help. Voting, as I've said, opens tomorrow at 9 a.m, closes Friday 12 p.m. If you are a campaigning group, campaigning can start tonight at 8 p.m. and closes on Friday at 12 p.m. And I think we are done. Anything else? Thank you very much for coming, everybody. Good night.